Hey, good afternoon, everyone. Sorry for running a little bit late here. Let me get my screen share up and let me get my pre-submitted question list up. All right, I'm in. You are up first, it appears. Where's my controls? There are my controls. And participants. All right, and I'm in. Your question is here. In a report, I use flow inline fields to calculate sums/count of the first column value. In the calculation flows, I use report row field 01 text value to filter results and do sum, but this doesn't provide the actual cell value. I need the cell value. What do you get back when you use field 01.text value?
Yes, I will. I was testing last night, and like when you go to row.field1, you find many variables. One of them is text value. In this
Mm-hmm.
particular column, I get nothing. It's almost null. I think, yeah, it's null. I tried another thing for testing purposes, and it showed like some sort of a string that looks like a row ID or something.
Okay.
So
What specific step are you using? Are you using a step or are you just using the report row in
so,
default input?
so I use steps. So here's what I do. This is a report within an advanced data grid. Okay, so I go to the report, and for the first column, I just select one of the data structure columns.
Mm-hmm.
This is the column that's equivalent to doing a SQL aggregate
Mm-hmm.
query. So it's grouped by this column. Okay,
Okay.
and then I'm gonna let's say I'm gonna sum a field with double data type in the
Mm-hmm.
same data structure.
Okay.
Okay, so I go to calculate column. I use inline field.
Mm-hmm.
I do the flow. I do a fetch from the data structure. So
Mm-hmm.
I use fetch entities, and I
I see.
set the filter
Mm-hmm.
uh, to the cell value of the first column, right? So I wanna get all the fields where the first column is equal to that value, and then I do the sum of the returned results.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so but you're using the default input here, report row, field
Yes,
01.
exactly.
So what I would suggest is using get cell by name,
Okay.
which takes the row in and it lets you define the name and it'll output the likelihood is the ordering is not the same as the rendering. And so you're getting something you don't expect
Mhm.
because there's not guaranteed that the order in the render is the order of the return from the way that the report engine functions.
Okay.
So here I could like do like email. I think I could do email address since I have a report of accounts here, and then I can make my output the report row, not report row, excuse me. It would be get cell by name output text value. And then
So
if I'm right,
the email address, that would be the
yeah.
column title.
Yeah, what it actually is going to be is the best place to find it is in this view SQL statement here because it needs
Um,
to match exactly.
this is interesting. Within the advanced data grid, the embedded report, this view SQL is disabled for some reason. I'm not sure why.
Okay. Well, that's
Uh,
unfortunate.
yeah.
I haven't used these steps before. Um, so you're passing a list, you're passing your list into this
Uh,
report, the collection?
uh, um,
Like you have a
what do you mean
form
passing?
with an advanced data grid. That advanced data grid has a data name called my report contents. And then the
Yeah.
flow calling that form is passing that collection into that input.
Yes.
Okay.
Um,
I would do the work you're doing here there just to as a note. That's going to be
okay.
much more performant.
Um, I don't know if it's possible to share my screen.
Yeah, unfortunately, no.
Okay. No worries. So the get sell by name, can you show me this step again?
hmm Yeah, get cell by name, takes in your data row, which here I'm passing a report row, and then the name you want to match on, which is
Okay.
usually the actual column name in the
Yes.
table, not
Yes.
the property name that you might think, which is why you can see I'm using the SQL syntax here, not what it might show
Yes.
as inside of decisions.
Okay, and then I use the value, the output of this step to filter the results that I fetch, and then I do my sum.
Yes, that sounds like it should work. And
Okay.
then this doesn't matter where the row, the ordering of the row, it
Yeah.
looks through the whole thing and pulls the right one out based on the property name.
Yes, and this is what I need. Yeah. All
Alrighty,
right. Yeah, I'm gonna do that. Thank you.
you bet. Question from Kenny. Do I see Kenny? I don't see Kenny. Question from Tyson. I don't see Tyson. Question from Chris. All right. Wow. All right, Mr. Bug. 2 questions from Mr. Chris Bug today. How are you, sir?
More than that, man.
You got more than that? Oh no.
That's all I gave you. I'll hit you up again tomorrow.
All right. What is the difference between a flow configured for integration as a webhook? Oh, actually, there's 2 different Chris's here. Sorry, this is Chris L. Apologies, Chris. Just a minute here. My bad. All right, Chris. Other Chris. What's the difference between a flow configured for integration as a webhook and one configured for integration as an API service? I don't actually think there's a functional difference at the end of the day between these. I don't honestly know the answer to this question. I think the difference is terminological, not functional.
I didn't know if maybe there's a difference in actual under the hood execution behaviors. That was sort of one of the things that I was sort of angling for, that you might say something of that sort. But as I kind of point out there, I'm trying to see, well, it looks like either way, I have to, identify which account is actually running this flow in some sense.
Correct.
And they seem to do everything. It seems like the mechanics of that part is parallel from what I can tell, just from poking at it, as it were, without live work. So one of the questions that brings up, though, is I want to subscribe to a service, and that service is happy to do an anonymous call.
Okay.
They are reluctant, for example, to provide like a basic login or a or even if I give them a session ID, they're resisting trying to include that in some fashion in the published call. So that brings up the question then, is there a way to receive a webhook from an anonymous source?
Yeah, like you could have a post to flow, use a post to flow and have them call post to flow. That's one of our flow behaviors, and then deal with that. And that can be as open as things are allowed to be. I don't know, but you might look at post to flow behavior. This is a behavior that we might use when the input format when the input format is not very controllable, since you have to kind of strongly type the input structure of a call and of a decisions, API call, or you can't pass in unexpected parameters, right?
Well, I mean, more to the point, negotiating how to do security is proving to be problematic. So post to flow.
The flow that runs this is defined in the flow itself, not as a parameter. Not so like what you might see if I were to create a post to flow here. Ooh, no. Advanced. There you go, post to flow handler. You'll see one of the properties which is unique to this is run this as, and you can specify a named session or an account to run this flow so that you don't have to pass in authentication. So this might be the route to run down to help you with that scenario.
All right, that does look promising.
Alrighty. Anything else related to that, sir? Back here.
Otherwise, though, the mechanics of passing off the data as a post here would be identical to what I'm used to.
You're gonna have to deal, you don't get it deserialized for free. You're gonna get like a payload in and have to deal with it in the flow, which is not something you deal with normally with the flow. Like we're gonna give you a payload and you might have to have a bespoke deserialized step to get it into from JSON into what you expect it to be.
So Data Explorer is gonna have a
You can see call data here and you like
so
payload
there's the call
data, right?
All right. Oh yeah, and so that payload data is I see what that's about. Query string was
Yep,
probably
query
be
string data
the-
pair. Yep, for any
Yep.
query params. Yep. So this is a place where a system can't control the configuration of the request it's sending, and decisions can't support the configuration they're sending. So you can use post to flow to sort of bridge the gap between those.
All right, that's what I needed to know then.
Alrighty. All right, and now to Mr. Bug. What's the best practice for securely storing credentials that must be accessed by flows?
Actually,
I recommend. Oh, go ahead.
I have a follow-on question to the post to flow. I've been using that a lot.
Okay.
But how do you control the response behavior? Like it basically sends a 200 OK as long as it reaches the end step. But like I need to be able to send something else.
The output data or a response code?
Different response code. And I mean, I know how to configure the output data, right? But like how
you could look at using like throw API exception, where you can specify a status code specifically in a message,
and then that will reply that changes the behavior of that reply, and then I can put data in the body of that.
Yes, yeah, you can.
Okay, cool.
Like all here, right. Like if I just had this go here and I'll say like status is, I don't know, 506, just, I don't know, that's probably made up. And then constant, I'll just put some garbage text.
Yeah.
Let me save this and get an integration details link. Can I just call this thing from a quick get URL, or is that going to be, oh yeah, that won't let me. Oh, there we go. There we go. Sorry. So I'm going to call this here. And then that should reply with, oh, well, I guess I have to configure this thing first. So let me configure it to run as the admin account. And save back here and refresh. There's my message. Now this won't show me the response code, but Postman would show me the response code.
That's right. No, that's what I was working with, and of course, okay, that can I okay, and I can specify the status code. Okay, cool. Yep. No, thanks. You can close out my support ticket on that.
Oh, cool. Yeah, you currently can't control the HTTP response code on the end step in any way, which I think is where you were headed. Yeah,
that's exactly where I was headed. No,
yeah, and technically it's an exception. So if you need to throw something that's not an exception, but whatever, you can just ignore the exception part. It just responds with whatever you give it. No, and you can serialize and pass a serialized string into the message if you need to.
Yep. No, got it. No, that's great. Thanks, man.
All right, you bet, dude. Happy to help, sir. All right, let me get back to my question list here. Someone's is trying to answer the question as well, Chris, about the difference between API and Webhook. Maybe I'll have an answer for you before this call is over. There's some conversation occurring with our product team right now. Back to my pre-submitted question list. Okay. All right, and so that's everyone, unless Tyson showed up. So Maria, I see you have a question here. Let me give you a chance to talk. I have created a new case page that I would like to use as a default for a project. Where would I be able to find that setting? I can set it on an individual case, but I have not been able to figure out how to set it as the default. So you should have a page data object in your case folder. So let me create a case really quickly. You might have to restart to get this to update existing cases, since we don't retroactively update these. Case test
Okay.
1A. Here we go. Create this. So what you want to do is, oh God, where in the folder tree did I go to? So what I'm going to do here is in case test 1A in the configuration folder, go to list, and then here you should have added a page, right? So if you go to create page or dashboard, page 1, what you get is a page and a thing called a page data. So I'm going to save this. Well, I have page and I have page 1. So let me create another page, page 2, create, and then you're going to get page 2. Now, if I look at the page data object and I edit page 2, I have the order property here. The order property controls 0 means default. So if I edit this and set this to 1 and then create a case, add case test 1A, garbage, it should then load. Is it always going to case view? That's there it is. Page 2. Page 2 is now my default page. Now you can write page visibility rules if you want to hide and show that default page, unless we give you that option on the page or the case object itself, which would be nice. Show default folder pages. Be nice to not have the default case view show. But then what you could do if you needed to is come here and you could come to all page visibility rule. And then you could write a rule to hide the case view page if you didn't want the case view page there at all. This should, I think, if I come back to my case, hide case view. Great. And I could do the same for runtime case and or folder view. And then I can only have my right now a completely empty page 2. And you can control the ordering of those using that page data object in the configuration folder.
Configuration folder is the step I was missing. Thank you so much.
Yep, you bet. All right, so now that they're not here, question from Kenny: how to use a converter to convert a list to a string? So you don't want to use a converter for that. You just want to use a step, Kenny. And the step you want to use is join strings. Join strings will take in a list of strings as source and a separator, so a comma or a pipe or whatever, and it will join that into a single string for you. Take a list of strings and put them into a single string, separated by whatever character that you want them separated by. Looking to update, and then a question here, I'll just put this in so everyone has access to everything. That's a question from Kenny, and a question from Tyson. Looking to update folder auto documentation, was trying to find where it's located so I can update that one. Okay. So for those of you that know, there's a really helpful action on designer folders to give you documentation for a project. Do I have a real project that I could do this on? Yeah, revision automated testing, here you go. If I go to import export, there's an action here called create, and then it's going to show me either by the folder or project. Is this? Yeah, project. I'm going to click project here. And what that's going to do is going to create, oh, didn't like that. So let's try the other action really quick. Create folder, there we go. It's going to create an HTML document with details of the, hold on, let me do that somewhere in a folder. I'll just do that in the folder I was just in. What's today? 710. Import, export, create documentation. Boom. Now you can see it's going to show me some things about the contents of that folder or the project itself. It's going to generate some documentation for me automatically. I believe what Tyson is asking is how to control the format of this. And there is, in a kind of odd place, man, we found this the other day. Will, do you remember where this was? We found it. Was it Designer Studio settings? Yeah. Download project documentation template. You can download this template. And then I think you can upload this. If I look for documentation, and then you can re-upload it after your edits to project documentation template here. That's how you can control the format of this automatically generated There you go. This automatically generated project documentation. If y'all haven't used this at all, please, it's a wonderful way that we've been working on it over the past few releases to try to make some health metrics show up in there. So you can have some idea about, you know, sort of sturdiness or maintainability of your existing projects. And it can help you just generate documentation for free, as if you're like me, you hate writing documentation. That's all of our pre-submitted and asked questions. So as always, if you guys have questions, you can type them in the chat in the QA section, or you can just use raise hand and I'll unmute you. Appreciate all the questions today. You skipped my real question, shipmate. Oh, sorry. You said you didn't have any more questions.
I didn't have more questions about post to flow handler.
Oh, I see it. What's the best practice for securely storing credentials that must be accessed by flows? How do you recommend developing unit tests for test cases? So how do you recommend developing unit tests for test cases where you want to make sure the flow throws an exception and handles it correctly? Okay, so let's start with the first one. Right now, I think the answer is create a database. You can use, well, I mean, or you can use past. I think the best answer is to use global constants. So if you look at designers, lookup lists and constants, you can create a constant and you can have its type B password so that it is obfuscated in the portal, and it would be saved, and it won't be saved as plain text in the database, I think. And at that point, you can use it in a flow.
Yeah, I don't think that'll work, because like if you have multiple customers, you need to store a unique token for each one. You just have a ton of global constants.
Okay.
But let me ask you this: if you set a field as encrypted on a standard database structure, like my understanding is it uses the encryption keys that are in that.
It does.
Okay. Who has access to those keys? Just the system administrator or just the Windows VM administrator?
Yeah, you can't access them through the portal. So it'd be someone with file system access on the application server.
Okay. Okay. I think that answers my.
And technically with PII, you can rotate those keys. So you can enforce key rotation. Default encryption doesn't, but the PII option does, and prevents you from re-adding it.
Okay. But okay, so what happens if I set a field as encrypted? I don't use PII. I set a field as encrypted, and then I go back and revise that data structure and disable this, encryption on that field. Is that a workaround where someone can basically access that data without those keys?
Well, technically they can still access it through reports and things, right? Like you could build reports or run flows to access that data. So a designer has access to that data in some way. Yes, but PII absolutely cannot be disabled.
Yeah.
Like you cannot disable PII. Now encryption itself, I don't think you can disable, but you might be able to. But I know with certainty that PII cannot be disabled from a sort of I don't know anything about cryptology or whatever, but it uses the same encryption methods and algorithms, so it's not more or less secure from an actual encryption standpoint. It's the same exact process, uses the same key. It's just that it now allows key rotation where default does not.
But I could also control that by putting that data structure in a folder where I've managed permissions on that folder. And now the only people who could run reports on that would be people who have permission. Okay. All right.
Yeah, correct. The thing people ask for that we don't have the ability to do without the SDK is to obfuscate it from the debugger. Now, My understanding is with a debugger, you can cause it to not show. But you can't currently set a property to be debugger invisible today.
But still, you could manage that with permissions. You could, I mean, no one can just walk into a flow and debug it.
The question is, I don't know if a flow, if a data type in a different project is hidden in the toolbox. You could write toolbox rules
Yeah.
to prevent it from being used. You could contrive a way to make it invisible, I guarantee.
Yeah.
One option too could just be to actually just have those be stored somewhere else and only accessible through like a web service call, through like some sort of API call to like a credential manager service. That guarantees they're not in the system at all.
Yeah.
And then hide the use of that step and lock down the flows that use those steps. That'd probably be the most secure of all scenarios.
And then PII, that still shows up in the debugger.
It does. It doesn't. The debugger rendering is the same between PII and regular encryption.
Yeah. Okay. I can play around with those behaviors. That's cool. All right. Thanks. And then the other one was, kind of recommendations on how to develop good unit tests where you want the flow to throw an error. Like,
so
like right now, if I hit run all and the flow throws an error because I put in some sample data that I want to throw, want to make sure it throws an error.
Okay.
Well, it doesn't come up as a pass unit test.
Ooh, X, what did I just do? Sorry. Yeah, great question. Let's do this together. I don't know. Oh, did I just create a design pattern? Delete that. Sorry. Delete design pattern. Yes. Create folder. So this would be unit tests that fail. I think we're going to want to look at the steps executed. So let's create a flow here. And in this flow, let's use a divide step. Oops. And we're going to have 2 inputs for our numbers. I don't know. I'll just say number 1 and divisor, since I can't remember the actual technical names because I'm an idiot. So I'll just do 2 integers. I think divisor is what I divide by, right? So there's divisor, and then there is number 1. Okay, maybe. And then let me save this. Let me debug, and let's create a unit test here. We'll do 1 and 10. Hold on, let me do this. Let me pass the output out here. So divide 1 output is our output. We'll debug. And divisor is 1 and the number is 10. And we'll save this as unit test called test1, save. Now, if I run this, it runs. It should output 10. Do I have these backwards? No, I don't. I'm just making a stupid example. So, okay, there's 5 and then 5 on my output step. Okay, so now we're going to create it. We're going to turn this into one of our good unit tests here, which I know you know how to do, but we're going to edit this unit test rule. And we're going to say if the divide 1 output equals 5. Okay. So now then if I run it, I should look at my rule passes. And if I come back here and run all, it passes. So now we want to create one. We're going to add a new test, test 2. Divisor is 0, number is 10. And we're going to save this. And then I'm going to run it. So it fails. So now if I look in the rule itself, I don't think it gives me anything to look at failure. Or maybe outcome path name. outcome path name is null. Let's do is empty. I'm just guessing here. Just
Yeah, I didn't try that. So let's
so
see.
if I run that, it throws, and then okay, that passes, which
To
means
do
if I run
run
them
all.
all. Okay, that doesn't work.
Yeah.
So maybe the flow, but let's see, what if we actually have a catch exception step?
And this is exactly, I mean, actually the other thing you did was a perfect example. Like, you might want to run a unit test on that post to flow handler, right?
Mhm.
Where it correctly sends a 403
Right.
instead of sending a 200. But that flow, if it hits that exception, shows up as an error on the debugger. And so I couldn't figure out a way.
Maybe we could do exception message is not empty. Because I'm looking, this is looking at one of the values in the flow. That value should be populated, right? That should be populated because it's giving me an error message. So if I come back and run all, it passes.
Oh, there you go.
So what I did there is inspect this rule has
Yep.
access to the data in the flow. And so so it has all that. So I just look to see if a output I only expect to show up on the catch exception path is has value.
That's cool. All right. No, that's awesome. Thanks, man.
You bet, dude. All right, and then Chris, Dev is not giving me a concrete answer, but it looks like they think the webhook one should be depreciated, that there's no difference. So I would say ignore it for now, but I haven't gotten a super concrete answer yet. And I think it's basically obsolete and should probably be hidden for backwards compatibility. But then that dev asked another dev for input and they haven't replied yet. So I think it's safe to assume that it is old. I've never used it, and that you should ignore it and just use API. Yeah, Alex, go ahead, sir. What you got?
Yeah, sorry, I got something very simple. I'm using a vertical stack.
Okay.
I fill it up with a bunch of grids. Now, is there an easy way to move the order of these things around?
It looks a little wonky, but yeah, you should be able to drag and drop them. So let me create a form here. Here's a form. So I'm going to delete this, and then I'm going to go to layout and find a vertical grid, right?
Vertical stack, yeah.
Vertical stack, excuse me. Here's a vertical stack. And then I'm going to bring over a grid 1 and a grid 2. And then let me go to view and make these colored so I can see them more easily. This one will be red. And then this one will be green. You should be able to just drag them. It looks a little weird. Oh.
Yeah, that's the problem I'm having.
Oh, then let me try. Hold on. Select parent, children's size, scroll. Can I go? Okay, well, that's not ideal. I can rearrange them by moving the first one down. What did I just?
I often
heck?
find myself having to, cut it and then paste it and that sort of stuff. But I was wondering, in the Explorer view, if there were not some way of doing this the way you kind of rearrange columns in other tools, where you can just change the order kind of thing.
You do in a normal grid have the ability to move them around from here.
Right.
But that same control doesn't exist in the vertical stack, unfortunately. So and I don't think this changes any of that. I think, yeah, it looks like right. Oh man. Oh, actually makes it harder when it stretches all the way. Let me Let me go to that and change that to not fill children to scroll. Yeah. Let me bring that back. So it looks like right now you have to rearrange from the top one down. I'll get that a DT in for that. That's unnecessarily painful.
Yeah, so I mean, but I find it more difficult, like, for example, if I have 10 objects in there, like 10 grids, one on top of each other, like all of a sudden I decide that I want to move the 8th one to the 2nd position.
Right.
It's, I was kind of hoping that there was some easy way to, you know, because as you, like, I end up like you, I end up in some other grid cell kind of thing.
Yeah, I don't think so, man, unfortunately.
Okay.
One of the things you could try is something like, let me go. So parent container, like go add another column.
Gotcha. Yeah.
And then
move them around that way.
Yeah, and then drop another one here and then start pulling them over and then pulling them back in and then delete the column. That's probably going to be your most efficient way to do it, even if and
Yeah,
like, and
okay.
then you would clear it, right? And then delete, and then it would be back to, oops, I did the wrong thing. Yeah, and then delete. And then it'd be back to the new order. That's probably the best way to do it, given the constraints today.
Okay, perfect. Appreciate that.
Okay. Anybody else got anything? All righty. I think that's everything. Good 40 minutes worth of questions.
Okay, great. Thanks, Will.
Yeah, you bet, Alex. All right.
Okay,
Thanks, everybody. Have a great day and talk to y'all tomorrow.
Gift card. Don't you give away a gift card at the end or something?
Man, if that would make people show up, I'd give away dinner with me. That's even more valuable than a gift card, right?
You'd have to pay me big time to eat.
I'd have to pay you. I have to pay you. I know.
See you, man. Thank you. That was awesome.
You
Appreciate
bet,
it.
man. All right. Thanks, everybody. See ya.